unfold. Today, we're diving deep underground to uncover a hidden network that is completely changing how we see forests. It's a secret social network, and it's happening right under our feet.
So when you walk through a forest, what do you see? Is it just a collection of silent, solitary trees, each one fighting for its own patch of light and space? Or is there something more going on? A hidden conversation, a connection happening just out of sight?
For centuries, pretty much our entire understanding of forests was based on what we could see above ground. And what we saw, well, it looked like a battle. And that led to what we can now call the lonely tree myth.
For a long time, the prevailing scientific view framed the forest as this brutal, gladiatorial arena where every tree was out for itself. But now, a totally new perspective is taking root, one that sees the forest not as a collection of individuals, but as a single connected super-organism, a cooperative community.
And wow, this idea, this dogma of competition, it was powerful. It all came from this really narrow take on survival of the fittest, and it drove most of the forestry practices in the 20th century. The logic seems simple, almost brutal. If you want to grow valuable timber, you just clear-cut the weeds, right? Get rid of the so-called competitors like birch trees. The assumption was if a tree is isolated, it'll have more resources for itself. At least that was the theory.
But nature, as it so often does, is full of surprises. And when a young scientist started noticing things that just didn't add up, it kicked off a web of discovery that would change, well, everything.
Okay, so here's the puzzle that started it all. A Canadian forester named Suzanne Simard. She noticed something really weird. When logging crews followed the playbook and removed those competitor birch trees, the valuable Douglas firs they were trying to help would often get sick. They'd turn yellow, and sometimes they'd even die. It just didn't make any sense. Why would removing competition make things worse?
So, to test this wild hypothesis she had, that maybe these trees were secretly helping each other, she set up this really elegant experiment. She took 3 trees, put a bag over a birch, and fed it radioactive carbon-14 gas. Then she gave a nearby fir a different stable kind of carbon. And then she waited and listened for a conversation nobody had ever heard before.
And this is the moment that changed everything. She runs her Geiger counter over the needles of the Douglas fir, the tree that was never exposed to the radioactive gas, and it crackles to life. The carbon had literally traveled from the birch, down through its roots, across the soil, and up into the fir. This wasn't a battle. It was a transfer. They were sharing.
Okay, so a connection was proven. It exists. But how? How in the world were the trees communicating? The answer lies in the biological hardware of the forest's hidden social network.
Well, the secret is this ancient, incredible partnership called mycorrhiza. It's a deal, a symbiosis between fungi and plant roots. And this isn't new, by the way. This partnership goes back over 400 million years. The fungus creates this vast microscopic web of threads called mycelium, which acts as a literal biological internet linking trees together.
But here's the thing. Just like our internet, it's not one giant single network. There are different incompatible systems. So you've got trees like pines and birches on one network, using one type of fungus, and then you have trees like cedars and maples using a completely different one. And that explains why the cedar in Simard's experiment was left out of the loop. It was basically on a different server, locked out of the conversation.
And the investment the trees make in this network, it's just staggering. I mean, get this, they send up to 30% of all the sugar they make from sunlight down into the soil just to feed their fungal partners. That's a massive energy bill. So you know the payoff has got to be huge.
So what do they get for that huge investment? Well, it supports a whole underground economy. You've got seasonal trading. The leafy birch sends sugar to the shaded fir in the summer, and the evergreen fir returns the favor in the spring and fall. You have the big established trees helping out the tiny seedlings that would otherwise die in the deep shade. And get this, dying trees give one last gift, dumping all their remaining resources into the network for the whole community. It's not just food either. They send out chemical warning signals to their neighbors about insect attacks.
But, as you can probably imagine, an idea this big, this revolutionary, it's not going to go unchallenged. It sparked a really fierce and important debate within the scientific community.
In 2023, a major critique came out in the journal Nature, and it basically pumped the brakes a little bit.
The authors argued that maybe the popular story was getting a little ahead of the science. They pointed to a potential citation bias, where we all get excited about studies that show a connection, while the studies that find no effect kind of get ignored, which can inflate the claims.
So let's break down where the science actually is right now, with all the nuance. The physical connection? Are trees linked by fungi? Yep, that's confirmed. No one really debates that. The carbon transfer? Also confirmed. But the big question is the amount they're transferring really enough to make a difference to the whole ecosystem? The idea of defense signaling is plausible for sure, but we need a lot more large-scale studies. And the most controversial claim, that trees can recognize and favor their own relatives, that one is still very, very hotly debated.
So no matter where all the scientific details eventually land, this new perspective, it's already changing everything. It forces us to ask some really profound questions about how we should interact with the forests around us.
And at the heart of this new story are what are called the mother trees. Now, these aren't just any big trees. They're the oldest, the largest, the most connected hubs in the entire network. A single mother tree can be linked to hundreds of other trees, acting like a central server that helps stabilize the whole forest community.
So, okay, why does this all matter in the real world? Well, for forestry, it's a huge deal. It's a powerful argument against clear-cutting, which just shatters this network. It suggests we should leave mother trees standing to help the forest grow back. For climate change, it turns out these connected, diverse forests are way more resilient. And maybe the most mind-bending part of all, there's growing evidence that these mother trees might actually recognize and send more resources to their own offspring.
Suzanne Simard, the very scientist who kicked all this off, she put it perfectly. She said, "Next time you hug a tree, remember, you are hugging a community." It's just a beautiful thought that completely changes how you look at the woods.
Which really leaves us with one final big question to chew on. If a forest isn't just a pile of lumber, but a complex, interconnected society, what is our role and what is our responsibility within that community?